Hello, welcome to Taxpayer Alert. I'm Al Segalla. I'll be your moderator. I'm also president of the Calaveras County Taxpayer Association. And this session, we're so delighted, we have Vicky Reinke, who's also chairman of the Calaveras County Central Committee Republican Party. And she's a very active lady, and she's also a director on our Taxpayer Association. So this is Old Home Week. And, well, this topic we're having this time is Measure D. Previously we had Barton Steveno, who's the proponent, and I guess he drafted that measure. And but we need to balance. When we have things like this, we also need to have people that are opposed to it so they can have equal time. That way the voters can have a balanced presentation. So this is the balance to Barton Steveno's presentation, and Vicky has put together some really good thoughts, and we're going to be going through questions. We'll handle a lot of information. Vicky, welcome. Thank you for coming. And
thank you, Al.
Let's talk a little bit about yourself. Could you give us a little background about Vicky?
Well, as you said, I am the chairman of the Calaveras Republicans here in Calaveras, but I'm wearing a different hat when I'm working on the No on D campaign. And so my background, I've been in Calaveras County for about 10 years, and we moved here when my husband retired, and I was always active in community events when I lived prior to living in Angels Camp. I was very active in the California State PTA and the local PTAs when my kids were in school. So I learned a lot about advocacy work. And so I've always been involved in my community, worked with city council and school board elections. And so this is just sort of a carry on to my new community to make sure that I'm aware of what's going on and being a voice for the citizens.
Well, I can witness what you've done since I've known you, and I'm really amazed that you can handle such really serious things that affect people's lives and still be friendly and be able to smile.
Right. Well, I can't take myself too seriously and life too seriously, but there are important issues, and Measure D is one of those that is really important to the people who live here.
I understand. Why did you become involved in the No on D campaign?
Well, I attend Board of Supervisors meetings. I've been attending them for a couple of years, and the topic of regulating marijuana grows here was on the agenda. I heard several people get up and talk about how marijuana growing in their neighborhoods was affecting their lives, and it really affected me, thinking, why should these people have to live like that in a beautiful community like Calaveras County? And then as time went on, I would meet people who would have the same stories about them not being able to use their own property because they were fearful of neighboring dogs and guns for protecting their marijuana fields. And a lot of them wouldn't get up and speak at the Board of Supervisors meetings because they were fearful. So it was just one of those things that I felt like, it's good to be their voice.
I see. There's a petition drive to put a ban initiative on the ballot, and are you also involved with that?
Well, there was an original ban petition out there. This was in May of last year, and I was involved in that one. We tried to get it approved to be put on the ballot, but as we all know, that initiative was rejected by the registrar's office for a technicality in the way we formatted our petition. So it didn't go forward. And at the same time, the proponents of the marijuana cultivation put out to the voters a petition as well to ask that we regulate marijuana, and they put that before the voters. So that's what's on the ballot today.
Measure D.
Is Measure D,
okay.
And that is what they came up with. They were able to get their signatures approved, and now we're going to be voting on that. So that's another reason I'm involved.
I went to Save Mart yesterday, And you wouldn't believe how many tables are there for signatures for to ban marijuana.
Right. Because they're out again trying to get the signatures all over again and looking towards possibly doing another ban initiative on the ballot in the spring.
Next
Yeah.
election.
Right.
Okay, it won't be a special election just for that.
It could be, but I think there's some other things that might come up as well.
I see.
And put it on there.
The Measure D proponents claim that it will keep Calaveras safe. And that's in quotes.
Well, of course, I don't agree with that. As you know, our sheriff and our county district attorney have come out in opposing Measure D. They don't feel that it's a good business for our county. We've seen crime related to marijuana recently. We've seen burglaries, homicides, human trafficking recently in the papers. So these marijuana grows do bring in the wrong kind of people, and it will bring crime. You know, marijuana, it's not growing a grape. It's not growing walnuts or tomatoes. It's growing a drug, and it's something they have to protect. So they have to have dogs and guns when they do harvest. So it's not just your everyday agricultural product.
What about the environment?
And I know they also claim that they're going to protect the environment, but Measure D being put on the ballot by the people does not require an environmental impact report. And that is something people might not realize. So it means that there will not be any environmental reports done on the industry. And today we don't know, what harm they're doing to the environment. And I know a lot of people, that's a concern of theirs. And so I believe an EIR needs to be done. So that's one of the downsides of this being on a ballot.
Now, I understand we have an ordinance that was passed by the Board of Supervisors, which does require an EIR, and that one is underway now, and it's somewhat similar to Measure D, and there seems to be problems in it working right. I think there's over 700 applicants for to get permits to run commercial marijuana, and I think there's only 3 that have been approved. So,
yeah, which I will, talk about a little bit as well.
Okay.
Because we need to take the time to look at the effects of this industry on our county. Again, putting Measure D through will not do that. It will turn our county into a permanently grow county. The Measure D will bring, it will allow the marijuana to be grown here without the supervisors being able to make any changes to it. It will be a vote by the people, put on by the people. It cannot be changed without the vote of the people. So, and what you're saying, that the ordinance is there, that would continue. And then the supervisors could put in a permanent ordinance later. That would require an EIR. So it's important that they do hopefully get that opportunity if we continue to have marijuana business in Calaveras County.
So the existing law is temporary, and they've cut off all new commercial permits after May 10th, I think.
Yeah, and that's
year.
what the urgency ordinance has done.
Right.
But Measure D will override the urgency ordinance, meaning that anybody that can come in and do what the ordinance says, then they can come in and grow. There's no more limitation on what date you started your grows. So.
Okay, so if Measure D passes, that supersedes the existing emergency ordinance, is that correct?
That's correct.
Does it supersede all of it or just the parts in conflict?
Well, it would supersede. That would be our new ordinance for the Calaveras County. And that ordinance follows very closely to the new laws put in by the legislatures, which they call MRSA, medical marijuana regulations.
I understand that's very controlling. They control distribution, manufacture, all kinds of...
That's right. And that would be the other addition in Calaveras County. Right now, our urgency ordinance does not take into account manufacturing, transportation, distribution. But Measure D does. So that would be an added piece to the marijuana cultivation and the marijuana commercial business. So, we haven't addressed those things as a county yet, but they would be legal here if Measure D passes.
Okay. Overall, do you think the sense of responsibility of the farmers has increased somewhat, decreased, or about the same? In other words, is that industry heading downhill, or is it improving? Or what's your thoughts on that?
Well, and I'll kind of talk a little bit about the regulations and the fact that you mentioned that there were 740 applications.
Right.
The application is there so that they can go out and do inspections, check and make sure these people are going to follow certain rules of the urgency ordinance, and then they can get permitted. And while this is all happening, they're out there able to grow marijuana. Well, my understanding is that there could be about 2,000 grows here in Calaveras County.
I think that's true.
Yeah, I've heard that number. Well, 740 of them have applied for applications. And as we had an update about 3 weeks ago, and I have the numbers written down here. Code enforcement had able to review 61 sites.
Okay.
Out of those 61 sites, 27 citations were made. And then the planning department has 26 applications that they've rejected. So, and then 2 registrants were approved. So we have 2 permitted
out of
grows
740.
Out of 740.
Something's not working.
And once you, if your application is rejected, you can go and appeal it.
Right.
So the person's growing their crops can go to appeal it before the Planning Commission, and then the Planning Commission makes a decision, and then if the Planning Commission denies that, it can go to the Board of Supervisors.
Right.
So it ends up being another 20 days, a month, while that they can appeal until they have to harvest, or and then if they don't get approved, then their crop is considered illegal and has to be gone.
Now, I understand they pay $5,000 to the county for the privilege of applying for a permit?
Yes, they did. And that also is money that can only be used for the purpose of permitting. So it can't be used on a lot of things, only for the permitting. And so it'd be like the processing of the paperwork, the sheriff's department doing a background check on the applicant. Any of the officers, the inspection people go out and they do the inspections. That can be paid for by the fee.
Right.
So it's very limited to what they can spend it on. And our county has put together a budget based on that money. And right now they are hiring 29 new positions. 29 just to cover the regulation of medical marijuana cultivation.
I'm seeing like a can of worms.
Yeah. So I just want to briefly kind of say what's been hired, who's been hired, so people kind of understand. And again, I have that written down. In this 29 positions, I don't have the full list, but this is some of it.
Okay.
4 deputy sheriffs, a sergeant, couple of service techs for the sheriff's department, 3 code enforcement officers, new county council lawyer, agricultural biologist, environmental health technicians, and 3 planners for the planning department. And then they also need some new equipment to go out and do these inspections. And they're going to need 2 4-wheel drive vehicles for the sheriff's department, 2 4-wheel drive for the code enforcement, and then some computers and things like that. So this fee, technically, is just buying people to regulate them.
Okay.
And it just, I don't know if it makes any sense to me that that's the case. But that's what's happening with the fee, the $5,000 fee. Then the other thing in Measure D is, in that measure it says $5,000 the first year and then $22,500 the year after. So they are reducing that fee in that ordinance.
So the people that are hired can expect a year's work and half of them are going to be gone the following year?
It could be. It could be. We don't know what the outcome is going to be because the 740 applicants, only 2 have gotten permitted, so we don't know what happens with the other 740, although we asked that question about next year. Well, evidently what happens, those people who have registered or applied,
right.
I should use the word applied, they can continue next year. Then they'll get their inspections, and they'll be denied or they'll be given their permit.
Okay, if they're denied, do they lose their $5,000?
Yeah, the $5,000 is just a fee. It's non-refundable, even with the 740 applicants. Though that fee that was collected is not refundable.
Okay, so I think Rebecca Callan, our auditor controller, mentioned that if you have 2 approved applicants and if the income is $44,000 each, that's $88,000 would hardly pay for a policeman, much less all the staffing that's needed. So
Right.
that maybe the numbers are not working the way they intended.
Exactly, and that's something that she's very concerned about and has, gave presentations that we may not be able to cover the costs of enforcing this new law. So, it's just that they didn't take the time to plan for this, and so it's showing up in the fact that we're trying to make the plan as we go.
I see.
Yeah.
The other alternative, well, let's get back on track here so I don't lose my place. What about water?
Yeah, and again, with the environmental stuff, the EIR would help with that as well, with the water issues. We're in a drought. People's wells are going dry in our county. I looked up to find out how much the water use is for marijuana grows, because we hear that it's a lot. It takes a lot of water to grow these plants. And there really hasn't been a good study on that. But we've heard from 1 gallon a day per plant to 6 gallons a day per plant. And I think it depends on the size of the plant. Containers that are growing outside the earth on top, those probably take more water because of evaporation. And then also the weather. If you're in Humboldt, maybe you don't need as much water because it's cooler there.
Right.
Calaveras County may need more water because we're warmer.
And drier.
And drier. So, that is, again, another issue that's very important to Calaveras County and its residents, and it needs to be addressed as well.
Now, I understand that the alternative to the emergency ordinance and D would be a ban on commercial growing. Would the ban have an EIR?
It wouldn't need one because we would just be done. And the other thing with the ban as well is, even with the sheriff's department, which on several occasions the sheriff and the district attorney have suggested that a ban is the best thing. So, from their point of view, it would be best. And the thing with the ban as well, when it comes to the grows, is that the sheriffs wouldn't have to question whether or not something is legal or illegal. They would just be able to go in and take care of it.
Illegal.
Right. And so, because with this ordinance, what it does is it makes the marijuana cultivation is civil. It makes it a zoning issue. and it becomes sort of an agriculture product. In other words, it's not illegal, so the sheriffs would not go in and take out their crops. So if you have a legal crop here and an illegal crop across the street, the sheriffs don't know the difference. So that becomes an issue. And then complaints come in, they're complaints to the code enforcement, not law enforcement, because it is just a nuisance call because this ordinance makes it legal for them to have these marijuana grows.
Okay, if a ban was imposed, it seems like the good growers would honor that and leave. And so then we were left with the black market. So dealing with the black market, the sheriff would need to beef up its ability to go after those people, which means that he needs money.
Right.
And it was suggested maybe not a gas tax, but a sales tax increase could fund that. Is that your thoughts on
there are some possibilities. I think one of the things that I realized is that our sheriff's department has been cut since about 2006.
30%.
Yeah, and we've never rebuilt our sheriff's department back up. That's something that has to be looked at. Our county budget needs to be looked at carefully. Is there more money to give our sheriff's department? And then for me as a citizen, if that needs to be, we need to tax ourselves, maybe a small amount on our property tax or something like what you suggested. I think that's something we need to consider as citizens if we want a safe community. The police, if we were to have a ban, we know that it's not supposed to be here, so there's no question. And yes, we all know that there's still people that like to do things illegally. They've been doing it. They will continue to do it. But they'll have a big message that says, we don't want the commercial cultivation of marijuana here. So, we as citizens have to find a way to make that happen.
What have been the consequences of the ban in other counties? A lot of counties have banned marijuana. Right.
I haven't heard a lot. I'm assuming that they're banned when they find a marijuana grow, they get it out of their county. And we do have the counties all around us who have banned marijuana cultivation, and that's why we are having an influx of people, because we've allowed it to happen here. So, that's part of the issue as well.
I think the proponents of D mentioned that a study was done with the suppliers of nursery products like earth and potting soil and that sort of thing, and they found that there was a 20% drop in the after the ban, which means that 80%, of course, within the 80% are tomato growers too,
Right.
Remains, which seems like the only thing is with these people, there's no keeping track of anything because they're total black market.
Right.
And so the people, and then those people are likely to be more criminals than the ones that are more honest that already left.
Right.
Right?
But we're going to get rid of all of them.
So we're going to get rid of the criminals too.
Yeah.
Well, that's...
And that's, of course,
Now, has that been done in other counties?
That I have to tell you, I don't know for sure how they're handling it. We all know that marijuana growing has been in the foothills, and it's not easy to get it all out of here, but it will happen.
There's no instant solutions.
Well, and the other thing too, and this is another piece, once the California state laws go into place and they regulate the marijuana, these people won't be able to sell their marijuana anywhere because they won't have the tags that are going to be required and the process. So in some ways that may get some of these illegal grows out of California.
Yeah, that's true. The state wants to control the transportation. So in the case of the black market, they don't have a concern with that because they don't follow the state law.
No.
The only ones that follow state law would be the honest growers that we got rid of. So,
Well, truthfully, it'll end up being a big business if they do allow it here. Probably tobacco companies will take it over.
then the price goes down, then where's the profit in growing this stuff?
Well,
Good point.
that's for the future to see.
Yeah.
I guess our concern here is that we don't want to have commercial cultivation of marijuana.
You want a
in
safe
Calaveras
community,
County. Yes.
basically.
Safe community,
Safe community.
where people can come and visit. Tourism is big here, and we want to keep it that way.
Okay, one of the questions, is it better to regulate versus ban the medical marijuana industry? I guess we covered that a little bit. We discovered that the emergency ordinance is not working very well because with all the applicants, there's not very many that have been approved, but we've taken $5,000 from over 700 people.
Right.
And they might not be very happy about that.
Yeah, I don't know how that works. I do know that they are allowed to charge that for an application fee. So, I'm sure that's just going to stay that way. But next year, I don't know what that application will look like. They haven't even finished the ones they've started.
This is pretty complex.
Yeah, it is. And I think, again, there's a lot of concern in our community about it. And I think Measure D is an opportunity for people to go to the polls and make a decision about whether they want to approve this commercial cultivation.
Suppose Measure D fails and ban fails. Then we're left with the emergency ordinance, which is going to turn into a permanent ordinance. Is that the way you see it?
Yeah, I guess so. Or at least our County Board of Supervisors will be making the decisions about what happens here in Calaveras County.
And environmental impact report.
Yeah. And, that could change. The people still have a voice in the county. And, it leaves it open at least to having people speak up as to whether they want that industry here or not.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, you have a Facebook page. It's Calaveras No and Measure D. And do you have a website?
We don't have a website. We only have the Facebook. This was a short campaign.
Okay.
We're only been doing this for a couple of months. And so, we decided just to do the Facebook page. We do have a post office box if people want to send us a donation.
P.O. Box 785, Altaville, 96221.
Oh, I'm sorry, that should be 95221.
Oh, okay. It says 96.
Yeah, I have a typo there.
Okay.
So, if you want to help us out, the one thing is we are just a grassroots citizens group.
Right.
And we are up against we're up against a much bigger organization that is well funded. So we appreciate any help we can get.